and they took them away from the land and away from the people. And they took all our rights, and they left us totally landless, without a treaty, without a reserve, with nothing. And we are the forgotten people, the Métis, the non-status Indian people of this country. We have nothing, absolutely nothing, except a desire and a will to find a place that is our own, a habitat where we can exercise our autonomy in North America and in Canada. And we have gone to the government for the last 100 years, one government after another. It didn't matter whether it was the Conservatives or the Liberals, it didn't matter. One came, one went, they all said the same thing. Métis and non-status people have no Aboriginal rights. We have no land claims. We are blanketed under the umbrella of Canadian citizenship. And isn't that a great thing? Isn't it a great thing when we have no Aboriginal rights? And people ask me, they say, what is Aboriginal rights? What does it mean? Well, it means simply this, that Aboriginal means from the beginning, and rights means truth and justice. And from the beginning, in North America, our people exercise truth and justice over their lives and in their lives. But now, today, that truth and justice that we understood has been taken away from us, because there is no truth or justice when 97% of our people, the Métis and non-status people in this country, live under the poverty line. When 60% of the people occupying the jails in this country are Métis and non-status Indian people. When our children, our little Métis children who are born of unions that are known in many places as illegitimate because they happen to be a union between a white man and an Indian woman, and that little illegitimate Métis child who's a half-breed now and doesn't belong on the reserve and doesn't belong out there in white society, they take that little Métis child and they stick him into the Children's Aid Society, who then takes him and ships him out to any place where they can find a home for him. And some of those homes aren't very good, and I can tell you because I went through it myself. I lived in 8 different foster homes because I was 9 months old when I was taken away by the Children's Aid Society. Out in the West, we have a great scandal happening right now. Our little Métis children are being sold down to the United States. Rich Americans are buying the offspring of illegitimate unions between white and Indian. And people ask me, well, how is it that these illegitimate unions take place? And I can tell you, part of it is because of the Indian Act. Part of it is because the Canadian government has produced an Indian Act which says that if an Indian woman marries a white man, she loses her Indian status and therefore cannot go back to her home, cannot go back to her family, cannot be buried on the reserve with her people. And so rather than lose her Indian status, rather than lose the little bit of land that she's got, she prefers to live without the union of marriage under the law of the land. Now, when we talk about the Aboriginal rights of Indigenous people, we have to talk a little bit about what the Canadian government, how they have responded to what we have been saying for the last 100 years. The Native Council of Canada, a year ago, last April, went to the federal government, went to the cabinet. We asked Mr. Trudeau, we said, Mr. Trudeau, do we have Aboriginal rights? We think we do. Is your government going to recognize our Aboriginal rights? Trudeau said, it's under study. It's under consideration. A few months went by and we wrote another letter to him. We said, is the Canadian government going to recognize the Aboriginal rights of Indigenous people? Mr. Trudeau wrote back another letter and said, it's under consideration. It's a very complicated issue. We have to sort it out. In the meantime, Mr. Trudeau has said that Louis Riel wasn't a traitor now. He says that Louis Riel was a great patriot and that he should be respected. But at the same time that he's talking about our leader 100 years ago, today he still refuses to recognize the Aboriginal rights of the Indigenous people of Canada. Now, just in closing, because Harry Daniels, who is here representing the Métis Association of Alberta, and who is an Aboriginal rights expert, much more than I am, has got a few words to say to you. But in leaving, I would just like to say a few last words on Mr. Trudeau's speech when he opened the United Nations Conference on Habitat. He talked about love. He said, we have to love. And in response to Mr. Trudeau's speech, I would like to recite this poem that I wrote called Old Woman. It goes like this. Old woman in the field, bent low, immobile and still. What thoughts tumble about behind those sad black eyes that have not felt the moist edges and wet bodies of heartbroken tears since the hunger pangs of transgression and broken promises melted away with the passing years? What language does the stream of consciousness employ? Is it words or sounds or mists of past reflections hastily snatched before the precious breath of life forsakes you entirely? No time now, old woman, for multiplication tables and essays. No time now for politics and religion. No time now for polite conversation. How close you are to the earth. How low you've bent. In the lengthening shadows, you appear to be a stone upon the bare horizon. And the bright sun of your youth has faded softly behind you, so that now the rays only reflect your image across the naked desert. And what of you? Will you slip away from my understanding and stand in the darkness? Old woman, I know who you are. I know this barren wasteland upon which I stand was once a forest. And you, old woman, had life and beauty, love and energy, freedom and passion, and chatter with the gods. Birch trees cried, "Here, take my bark that you might sleep in my arms." And the great creatures of the forest dropped their fur clothing and said, "Let my warmth be your warmth. Make a pillow for your head." And the birds swooped down and laid their finest plumage at your feet and bade you wear them. For you were their child, their brown golden child, who sang their songs and danced their dance. No, your eyes have not harbored tears, but your body has carried the weight of treachery. For others came, pale, helpless souls, and your golden arms encircled them, and your golden heart embraced them, and your golden mouth kissed them. This was your youth, old woman, bent so low. And where are they now? After they cut down your beloved forests, and slaughtered your animal brothers, and tore the wings from your bright birds, and ground your mountains into dust. Did they leave you with anything at all, except pain and misery and sorrow and hunger? What thoughts have you? What last word before you give up your spirit to eternity? Did they leave you even that? One thought, one word to take with you to the last hunting ground? Love,